We're starting a series, we're going to call it Resource Roundtable, where we periodically bring in people from the community. Today we brought in 3 technical advisors from SBDC for you to meet, Small Business Development Center. But we'll provide an ongoing meetup, if you will, for people in the community to meet service providers and others that can be helpful to small business. And we're calling it Roundtable because we want to leave some time in these meetings. We can share some information, but also have time to ask questions and to offer resources back and forth to each other as well during this hour. So today we're going to meet with 3 individuals, and Steve Burke will present first. I think I'd like to introduce you not all at once, but before your segment, just so we can kind of, we won't forget the introduction by the time the presenter's turn comes up. So Steve is presenting first. I used to work for SBDC with these wonderful 3 people, and what I appreciate about Steve is that he curates these efficient pathways to learning. So if there was something gnarly that many of my clients were having trouble with, and I go, gosh, Steve, I don't feel like I'm getting across, for instance, how to make friends with your financial statements and use them for effective decision making. Like there's just something I'm not quite doing properly. And he'd say, oh, I've got a process for that. Here's the way to approach it. And I'd try it, and sure enough, it was really efficient and it helped people understand, and we could get through the material quickly. So like if you've read the book and watched the video and you're still struggling with something in a business context, Steve's a good guy to talk to. So what I've asked Steve to speak about today is in general, what the Small Business Development Center offers for businesses across the state. And in particular, if there are some things that businesses, maybe should learn, but don't get around to, that might be helpful to, just lodge in the back of your brain. Like, well, maybe I should spend a few minutes to figure out how to do this or that. So welcome, Steve, and I'll give you the floor. Thank you very much for being here.
Well, thanks, Cindy. It's great to see you again. We spent several years working together, and Cindy was an absolute star in our network, and we miss you. So, but glad to be connected again with you through here in Port Townsend and Jefferson County, and so we're anxious to sort of build our relationship. Actually, I should say rebuild it. We used to have an office in Port Townsend, 7, 8 years ago, I want to say. And we would love to be able to, get to a point where we could do that again. Let me give you a little bit of background on the SBDC, and I do have to apologize. We've been pressed into hitting a deadline on our annual business planning process, which Cindy remembers well. And I've got to jump off about 12:30, but I'll leave you with my other 2 colleagues without stealing your introductions ahead of time, Ellie and Mia, who are just amazing, and will be able to fill in any additional things that I wind up missing. The SBDC was created in 1980, so we're moving into our 42nd year, created by Congress in the original Small Business Act. And it was the original charter for SBDCs, which actually exist in every state. There are some more than one network in a few large states, so that and several of the territories as well. So there's actually 62 total SBDC networks across the country. Every year, Congress appropriates a certain amount of money. It's running about $136 million nationwide right now. And then each state gets a certain portion of that. But in the federal state partnership that this created, the requirement was that every SBDC operation be managed or administered by an institution of higher education. And so in fact, originally with land grant colleges. And the only land grant college in Washington is Washington State University. So I am an employee of Washington State University as Mia is, Ellie is, and Cindy was. We do have some areas that are sub-recipient centers. So we also have employees that are part of Western Washington University, Highline Community College, Green River Community College, South Puget Sound Community College. We have separate sub-recipient contracts with them. But in this funding element of the federal-state partnership, we can only pull $1 of that federal funding if we have a local dollar at the state level, non-federal at the state level, to support that. So some of that does come from the fact that we are administered by Washington State University, and there's some in-kind elements to that. But the rest of our funding comes from other stakeholders. And certainly our interest, one interest that we have, and not just supporting those of you in the Port Townsend area in Jefferson County, is the fact that besides being able to provide technical assistance to your small business owners, we can really increase that potential and that capacity if someday down the road we've got some financial support from you for that regard. Mm-hmm. So I won't go into that. That's a topic to get into a little bit more later, but for the time being, I think that that really kind of gives you an overarching element. Currently in the state, we've got a few vacancies. We've just had some retirements and a couple of people move on to other positions. But when fully staffed, we get through our hiring process to fill those positions. We're going to be very close to 40 advisors in 27 locations around the state. And so when you look at it in that context, we really have the largest technical assistance footprint in the state of Washington. And our advisors, like Mia and Ellie, go through a fairly rigorous certification process, and then oftentimes add to that with additional specialty, such as marketing and exporting. And so we really can speak to, and when you engage with a Washington SBDC, you're engaging with an entire network of all of our advisors and the experience that you have, which is, Cindy is aware of that, and that's one of the reasons why she brought more than just me to rattle on to you today. And so if anybody that is working with a small business in your area, that advisor doesn't have a specific expertise in something, they can reach out to others in the network and be able to obtain that expertise. And so the advisor who is currently serving most of the peninsula right now is Christina Hines. She's actually based out of Coopville. And she is serving most of the peninsula right now. This is relatively easy to do while we're working remotely. We would like to be able to add another advisor in Kalaloch or Jefferson County, but we've got to develop the funding source to do that. So, and by the way, Christina Hines, her specialty is human resources, and she's actually told me yesterday that she has taken on the role of being the treasurer for a segment of the Washington branch of the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM. So we've got staff that are very heavily engaged in numerous aspects, and we bring that technical assistance and the certification that our advisors go through to really provide that added value to the small business owners. In 2021, we served just under 4,000 small businesses in the state of Washington. We assisted with over $112 million in capital infusion, which is people who may need capital. And we did numerous webinars that involved both Mia and Ellie and myself that supported pandemic causes, SBA elements, as well as how to marketing, and especially in marketing in tough times. And it's been a tough time for exporting, but Ellie and her colleagues have certainly done a great job involved in that too. I'm not going to go into their work any further because you'll hear from them. But Cindy, is there anything else that you wanted me to cover that you recall, and or are there any questions?
Yeah, I just wondered if you had an example of some essential business learning that some businesses may not think to prioritize.
Well, I think I should take the clue that from you that you mentioned a little bit earlier, and that's the topic that I specifically refer to as financial discipline. One of the things that we've learned, and I've been at this now for about 12 years here with the Washington State Network, is that 9 out of 10, maybe, those small businesses that come to us might be able to produce, and I say might, a profit loss, but probably not a balance sheet or an understanding of their accounts receivables, accounts payables, their historic cash flow, or the ability to actually do cash flow forecasting. And one of the reasons that we talk about cash flow forecasting as a small business owner is that A, to understand your money, but B, one of the things that I like to say is that a person without a plan always winds up getting managed by other people who have one. And I find that to be consistently true. And so being able to put together a plan involving your business and your money particularly is absolutely essential to be able to move forward, especially when you've got a recession or a pandemic / recession like we're in even currently. So I teach, one of the things that I do on a regular basis is teach a webinar on financial discipline, which involves a specific process for a business owner to go through, where they can spend about 90 minutes a week, have a much greater education and understanding of their financial situation, all of the critical financial reports that are necessary if they're going to seek financing, as well as having real oversight of their business and be able to do cash flow forecasting, and to do it for the most part on about 90 minutes a week if they create a system that allows them to be able to do that. So that's just one of the processes I think Cindy was referring to that I think we are working with clients, all of us are working with clients in that area of financial discipline, for a term I like to use a lot, virtually every day.
That's so great. Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
I'm thinking ahead because we're just getting ready to put out an application for a round of ARPA funding for small business. And my experience working with SBDC with some of the early products like the PPP and the EIDL money, you needed to illustrate your need, and that required some kind of financial record that you'd either attest you had or you had to upload. And a lot of businesses just didn't have those records or couldn't put it together, quickly enough to meet the application window. So I think getting in these practices to understand, the critical functions of your business and have some documentation of that is really important. And thank you for taking the time to, develop a process so people can learn that with the least amount of distress.
You're absolutely right, Cindy, and this is especially true when we are dealing with the pandemic resources that really were based upon demonstration of economic injury. Well, if you didn't have solid financials in 2019, and we even dealt with people who didn't have tax returns because they just didn't feel like putting them together or didn't know how to make that happen, but certainly financial reports. So that when it came time for the PPP, the EIDL, the RRF, the SVOG, okay, I'm using all the acronyms, the targeted idle assistance, and all of those things that we spent a good portion of the last 2 years talking about, simply not able to apply for those things because they can't demonstrate the economic injury because they don't have good financial reports. And thanks, Mia, I just put a general link into our list of webinars, both those that are on demand and those that are upcoming, so that to answer your question about where you can sign up. When you do sign up for the first time, we do ask you to sign up as a client, a training client with us, which can then be converted into a counseling client, and we can work with you one-on-one. Most of the work that we do is one-on-one, entirely confidential. When we start to talk about people, and this is a little bit of a concern for some of our stakeholders who want to know who we're working with. But we, under our charter with Congress and the SBA, by law, we have to retain total confidentiality with our clients unless we can specifically get their written permission to disclose. And we tend to do that in success stories and what have you. But that's really our value proposition, is our ability to really dig into somebody's personal story, what it is about them that is in their head going on with their business. I think I've learned that most business success and or failure is really based in what's going on in that business owner's head. To what extent have they decided to be a business person and learn the comprehensive business skills that are necessary? One of those being just financial strategy. We have a lot of, and Mia put a specific one, I think probably on where I've done this webinar in the past, on demand. And then we've got others that are coming up, and you can go there and sign up, and we'd love to have you. So.
Well, Steve, Jay's got a question, but I want to ask one just prior, which is like, how much do these services cost?
And thank you for bringing that up, because I certainly didn't address it as I should have. Since we are a publicly funded entity, our services are at no cost to the client. We don't actually say that our services are free, because the three of us and the rest of our advisors are full-time, year-round paid professionals. Most of us that have come into the small business development centers have advanced degrees and or have operated our own businesses in the past. And so we bring that level of both education and expertise with us. So we're full-time year-round paid professionals, as opposed to other organizations that are very, very good. Certainly not taking anything away, but many of you may have heard of SCORE, which is a great organization. It's I think it's called anyway, Retired Executives. What is it, Mia? I can't remember exactly what the acronym is.
Service Corps Retired Executives.
Are you one?
I was thinking about it.
All right. So that's an excellent organization. They tend to focus more on the early stage startup, about 80% that, and about 20% existing businesses. And we're just about the opposite, right? In terms of the type of businesses that we work with. But SCORE brings on volunteers, right? Which is great, and certainly serves a very high need. In our case, though, none of us are volunteers. And so we wind up being able to work with clients oftentimes for years, which is a real, I think, benefit that we can bring and really work with somebody. And I've got many clients that I've been working with for 3, 4, 5, even 6 years. And one who, even during the pandemic, who sells wedding cakes, is actually expanding into a whole new location and opened up yesterday at her new location. So it's not often that you hear about people who are, successful enough to be able to do that kind of an expansion during a pandemic. But sure enough, and they're already seeing great results there. So anyway, that's just one example.
Jay, do you want to ask a question now or later?
Yeah, that's fine. You actually touched a little bit on it. My question was, is there a stage of the business that is when the business should come to see you?
We do, and in fact, Mia has been involved in this at a level of startup workshops for those people to at least get the very basic foundation, and then if and when they're ready, willing, and able to move them on to one-on-one advising with an advisor to help them really begin then to figure out how to grow their business. But generally speaking, beyond that very initial stage, which we have, special program for, most of our clients come at us somewhere in the after the first year and are in that process of trying to grow. We do have a lot of clients that we work with or come to us that need a turnaround strategy, which is really one of my specialties. I've spent a lot of time working with clients who have been in real distress and figuring out a way to turn them around. I've had a fair amount of success with that. So when you think about stages, when you're dealing with the Great Recession, when you're dealing with this pandemic and its recession, when the government closes everything down, it's hard to understand stages. I was just on a webinar earlier this morning with the Flex Fund. One of the things that we're a technical assistance provider for the Flex Fund, and some time later we can go into that if you want to, if you haven't heard of it. But it's a special fund to try and reach those that have had barriers in the past, but it's also another one where people had to show some economic injury as a result of the pandemic. And we were talking about in this Flex Fund webinar, we were talking about various stages that somebody might be in as they get into that stage. And the reality is that right now there are more people trying to figure out, how to recover from the trouble that we've been in through this rough last couple of years, and which doesn't seem to be abating, although I'm personally hoping that we're beginning to see the end of it. We can get back to some sense of normal later this year, but it's going to be a tough transition, and there are a lot of businesses that really need assistance. And we've been spending the better part, if you want to talk about stages, the last 2 years really helping people through the tough times that we've been in. Good question. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Steve. Well, we won't be offended if you have to drop off, and I really appreciate that you could carve out time for us today. Thanks for being here.
You bet. Happy to do it, and happy to do it again too, Cindy. If you want to schedule something and do a particular topic, I'm more than happy to.
Sure. Yeah, we'll likely want to drill into some topics depending on what people want going forward.
Super. Well, I'll put you in good hands with me and Ellie and Cindy, and I'll look forward to meeting up with all of you again.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Well, next I'd like to introduce Mia Johnstone. Mia is the advisor in Aberdeen and Grays County. And I think of Mia as a marketing maven. Mia does a lot with online marketing, which is especially important now during COVID. She's got a great way of helping businesses figure out how to connect with their customer. And she can help assist a business decide where it's going to be effective to put their time and energy, since marketing budgets are generally limited. And Mia's also really good at photography and how to use images in marketing. So just a quick story to share my experience of Mia. We got to collaborate on a project where we were working with a group of rural retail brick and mortar businesses that, right during the start of COVID, when they realized that they couldn't sell in the way that they were used to selling, and had to all of a sudden as a group learn how to use digital tools to market their goods. So it was an interesting project, and I was really thankful to have Mia's expertise on that. And the people really appreciated it because they had to learn to think differently really quickly. And we did that, and had some fun at the same time. So thanks, Mia, for being here. And we'd love to hear a little bit about your approach and the types of clients that you feel like you're able to work with well.
Sure. And Cindy, that was such a nice intro. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lovely. Well, I just have to say before I go on, Cindy is so near and dear to my heart. You are all so lucky. So awesome to be here. So as Cindy says, like I am really a relationship person. When it comes down to marketing, marketing is all about relationships and how we build relationships with people. And I absolutely love talking about it. It is my favorite thing. I do have just a few slides to share, if that's okay, just to help with the direction and visuals. Sure. And
yeah, I think you can just share your screen.
Perfect. I will do that. So, and just to start off right here, this is our, and are you seeing my training events screen right now?
Yes.
This is the link that Steve put into the chat box to all of our live, it lands you on our live webinars, just to let you know. And we have some amazing webinars. We have some great resources here for local businesses. And then if you scroll all the way to the top and you go to on demand, these are the on demand webinars. And we have so many on here. Create a website that engages on demand is one of, so I do a lot of these, and this is one of our most popular one. It's an amazing webinar about showing you how to build a website that's going to be most effective for you. Also, our social media content one is great. So you've got some great resources here, and that link is in the chat box. All right, and then I'm just going to go to this slideshow. So just a little bit about me. I have over 10 years of experience in photography. I did high-end retail sales. So I know what it's like to sell products that are high cost, and it's really kind of niching down your market. I did that with photography and selling wall portraits and albums. I've published a magazine. So I've done like cold, I don't want to call it cold sales, but like the hardest sales is selling magazine ads. Like who wants to do that? And I soon learned the key thing is creating relationships with people. I was a connector when I did ad sales, and I shouldn't even call it ad sales. I was a very niche magazine, so I knew people very well, and I became the central source of information. So I've taken all that knowledge, and now I use it for my businesses. So now I'm a certified business advisor with the SBDC. So I just went over this with you, all of our events, and I have a lot of webinars on here also that will connect with you. And then so I can help with social media strategy. So some people come to me and they're like, I want to do social media. Like I have these 3 different platforms I want to be on, and it's just me as a solo business. And I'm like, well, hold on, horsey, let's wait one second. You're a solopreneur and you want to be on 3 different social media outlets. Let's think about this a little bit more strategically. So I'm really good at helping you identify the right platforms where you can be, that's going to be most effective for your time. Your time is the most important thing you will ever have in this life. It is the most finite thing that we have. Everything else is infinite. And so, but your time is precious. So let's put that time to use in wise ways, especially with social media, because who wants to be on social media more than we need to be? So website marketing, I talked about that webinar on demand. So one of the things, and so I love helping small businesses understand what their website needs are, because people will come to me and say they need a new website and they're hiring someone to do it for them. I'm like, oh, I get like a little bit of a heart attack. I'm like, how much money are you spending? And like, have you already booked them? Because the thing about a website is that it takes you understanding your values as a business and what you want to put out as your benefits and et cetera, and who your target market is, understanding that extremely clearly, and then finding someone that knows how to translate that as a website. You essentially need to take your ideas, package together with your copy and say, this is what I want. And you want someone that knows how to take that information and implement it well. So there's a process in understanding what you want on your website, what you want to say, who you're targeting, the look you want, and then also finding that right website designer. So I can help you with that process, whether you're like a new business or you're an existing business. I can definitely help you with that. And then also, like, it's not just a website. You want your website to engage people and to make sure you're collecting customers on that website too. You don't want it just to be a static piece. It should be dynamic and connecting with people. Imagine if you have like 10 people signed up for your newsletter in the morning because they hit your website. That's what you want. So I can help you increase your customer base. All of this is connected, I mean, including to your website, but like I can help you understand how to connect with those customers that are your ideal customers. You know, how are you going to reach people? Who are the people you're supposed to reach? You know, do we have that clarity? It always amazes me. Some people are running businesses, but they don't have who their customer is. But it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to narrow down and say, that person, you know, I'm reaching only this specific market. This is who I want to serve. I know that if they have XYZ, they're likely not my customer. A lot of people have a hard time doing that and differentiating. And so I'm kind of here to help you see, which is the next slide, understanding your goals and values. And I put business in parentheses because essentially our business is an extension of ourselves in many ways, because if it's not, we're not in a happy place likely. So understanding our own goals and values, and then understanding that in the context of our business, helps us build something that is going to be so much more sustainable, so much more enjoyable, and something that's going to just have that foundation and base that we need to be successful. And I can help you with that. I love talking about this topic. What are your values? You know, what is most important to you? And what does your business stand for that's most important? And who are those people that you really want to serve to help them on that right path? Because our businesses are about improving lives. That is the foundation of what we do. We are transformational, and we don't identify that. And we absolutely are transformational. And once we identify that, marketing becomes so much easier. And I love doing this. So if you want some stronger ideas about how to make those stronger connections, have stronger marketing, have stronger goals and value-centric messaging in your marketing, you know, you contact me. So there you
go. I love your passion for this topic, Mia.
Oh, it's so there. Thank you, Cindy. Teaching people how to have stronger relationships is my thing.
Mm-hmm. You're really good at it too. Does anybody have a question for Mia?
Well, then I wasn't good enough if there's no questions.
Oh,
what's your email address again? That was too quick.
Sure, I'll put it in the chat for you.
Okay.
I was just something you said as to who your customer is, and one of the things I've found is it's hard to get people to understand who their customer is not. Is that something you deal with?
Yeah,
who is not their customer?
And that's right. Like it's interesting you say that. And sometimes it's so there on the surface, but as a business owner, we don't own it. Like I just had someone who does high-end boutique clothing that they make for babies. And her website looks like it's basic clothing. And I'm like, look, you're charging $100 for this thing that I can go to Target and buy something similar for like $30. I don't understand that. And because your website doesn't tell me the difference. So we need to communicate that you are differentiating yourself as a boutique product. You are not targeting the Target shopper. And if you don't own that, it's way too broad. You're not going to be able to create a tone on that website for the value you are offering in your product, because you have value, but we need to communicate that value, because if you're going to charge $100, we need to communicate value. So yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's like so clear and blatant, but it's not clear and blatant on the website. Good point.
Yeah, I remember an article that I read about a company. It was a couple of like guys that developed a process for putting images on shirts, and it was sort of like, you know, dudes, like really masculine, tough guy imagery. And it turned out that the process, for some reason, was attractive to little old ladies that wanted like cats and flowers, you know? So like they had really guessed wrong about who would wear that type of imagery on a t-shirt. And I'd love to find out, you know, 5 or 10 years later, if they ended up pivoting and making the cat and flower t-shirts, or if they,
you know, that's That's such an interesting thing you say, because like I read, one of my favorite things is, I read tons of business books, but the businesses that are so clear about what they're doing, they've done so much research to understand their market and what their market wants. And once they understand it, they go and do more research on that market and what they want. It's a it's a process. It's not like a one-time thing. And that's a really good point that you bring up. So one of the things I would say is make sure you're showing up consistency. So even though people aren't responding, it doesn't mean they're not listening. It doesn't mean that that one connection isn't making them think, oh, maybe I should connect with them, because you don't know how many times, you don't know what you don't know. How many times are people walking around once they've had a feeling like, oh, maybe I should connect with the EDC? You don't know. Keep showing up consistently. And then what I would do is, maybe if you can, if there are some of those former surly people that you've connected with, see if you can ask them, what are the main pain points? What's stopping you from connecting? Ask them why. What is it that's stopping you? What's made you change? And now you want to speak to that story. You want to share a success story. You don't have to use names, but share a success story of how you've helped somebody that didn't want to come and what happened. Those success stories are magical. And I'll give an example. Like the last thing, what you really want to do is make sure you're connecting with them on the platforms where they want to connect. So, if they like social media, make sure you're using social media. I would use multiple platforms. And also, but here's the other thing, communication is two ways. What's the communication that you're putting out? How does that look? Is it friendly? Is it approachable? And then are we using video? So something like SendSpark, I just subscribed to SendSpark and I love it, because you can input SendSpark into an email and it's a GIF of your face talking. And you can actually put, what I usually do is I take a piece of paper and I write something, like if it's to an individual person, I'll say, hi, Cindy, or you say, hi, business owner, and they click on, it's in the email and they can click in the email. Now they're opening a video of you talking to them in the space where they're comfortable on their terms and you have their attention. So I want to know, how are you connecting with them so that they're getting that message in a clear and succinct way in a place where they're safe? Because I'm sure you have success stories. I'm sure you have resources for them. Absolutely. You're busting your buns for the community. So let's find ways of sharing those stories that can help connect them, and continue to do it. Continue to show up, because I was working with private schools, and I've had some people in private schools that were very hesitant about letting me into their little inner circle, because it's a very tiny little community. They don't want me around. And this is for my side work. But I just, I kind of just ignored the talk that I thought was going on. I kept showing up. I kept them in my circle, even though, they may not have kept me in theirs. And I kept showing up. And eventually I was asked to speak at conferences. I'm asked to go to XYZ, but consistently show up and do it with a friendliness. Do it with a friendliness. Great question.
Thanks, Mia. I'm so happy you could be here with us today.
Me too. And I'm happy to talk more in depth if you want to connect with me about that challenge, and I can give you some really clear ideas. I can walk you through SendSpark. It's a magical thing too. So.
All right, I'd like to look at that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I want to move on to our last presenter now, Ellie He. Ellie is our exporting expert at SBDC. What I admire about Ellie is that she's able to translate the complexity of moving from thinking as a domestic business to thinking as an international business. I myself started a business in the Netherlands and was involved in product development internationally. And even though I have that experience as an advisor in Washington State, I'd often come up, be asked questions that I had no idea how to approach, because that global topic of exporting, it's complex. And you might, I knew a little fragment of it. But I've been really lucky to work with Ellie, and every time I get a chance to overlap with her, I learn something amazing that I had no idea about. Exporting is just a different animal, and I think Ellie's one of the best translators I've ever met for demystifying the process, especially for people new to exporting. So Ellie, I'd love to hear you talk about what you do.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you for the kind words and for the opportunity. Yeah. So I do have a few slides, but before that, just to share a little more information about me. I have been working at SBDC for almost 3 years now. And before that, I have 15 years of experience in global business development. That includes 7 years at K&L Gates. It's a big law firm, global law firm, and I served as the business development advisor to the lawyers to help them gain business from their global clients. And I also worked for a few years at small and medium-sized businesses and worked for 6 years in China also. So I'm bilingual in English and Mandarin. And as many of my colleagues at SBDC, I have an MBA. So my MBA was from Penn State. Really enjoy working with small businesses here. And hopefully my main task is to encourage and enable small businesses to export. And so I'm gonna share a few slides to let me see. All right, is that showing correctly now?
That looks good.
Okay, yeah, so this is the introduction slides that I use with typically our community partners. So I want to cover 3 topics. Why we want to encourage small businesses to export, and talk about export readiness, how to get them ready and why is it important, and what are some resources out there to help small businesses export. So why export? As of 2021, the world population is 6.9 or 7.9. I think it's 7.9 billion. And the US population is close to 333 million. So about 95 to 96% of population is outside of the United States. There is a huge potential for increased sales and profits for most businesses. And export is a great way for the businesses to diversify. So similar to your investment portfolio, if you just focus on the US, you are more volatile to say there is a recession in the US or there is a competition. But if you diversify to have more markets, you will be able to survive, more likely to survive a recession or other competition. For businesses that have seasonal products, or if they have excess production capacity, exporting is also a great way to get to use those excess products or production. And also in the process of exporting, businesses typically gain more information about foreign competition and gain insight to improve your product or service. So that turn out help you enhance the domestic competitiveness. And last but not least, we found that many successful small business exporters, they just enjoy the process, meeting with people from different cultures and chat with businesses in the same industry, but running the business in a totally different system. And also before COVID and hopefully soon, they get to travel internationally. And that's a lot of fun. So these are all like good reasons to export. Should we encourage all small businesses to export? We believe that most small businesses can export, but the question is whether or not they're ready. And the biggest mistake I have seen among small businesses is that they jump on, start to try to find the buyers before they are ready. So I want to show you here. Generally, it's kind of like a process, but it's not like you don't have to do it step by step. But many businesses, they jump to find the buyers and try to export, and they just missed all the steps before that. So let's take a look at those steps. First, assess the market potential. So export takes time and resources. You need to have a big enough market potential to justify that kind of commitment. Understand what's the benefits and the trade-offs. So you may need to have extra staff, or if you are one person firm, do you really have that kind of energy to take care of export and your domestic business? Assess where you are in terms of the readiness. And we at SBDC, we have a free assessment tool on our website. It's important to learn some export knowledge. For example, there are extra compliance requirements when you sell outside of the United States. And there are international trade terms, or we call Incoterms. They are widely used across industries in international trade. And for example, your IP, the trademark, your patent, those you registered in the US, they do not provide protection outside of the US. So what are the risks and options? So with all this knowledge, we encourage small businesses to develop an export plan. And part of that plan include market research. SBDC has a market research team we can help with that. And then after these steps, then find the buyers. That's when the fun starts. You attend the trade shows, you update the website to make it announce to the world, basically you are open to doing business with certain countries. And then you export. So to help small businesses go through and get ready, there are a lot of resources available. I start with SBDC. So I work with a little over 100 companies now in Western Washington. And so we frequently, for small business exporters, one-on-one, we discuss about the planning, how to get them ready, and the compliance issues. What are the requirements they need to consider specific to their products? Other technical knowledge and training, including Incoterms and the payment risk, and what are the tools to mitigate those risks. And I work with the market research team to get them some market research report as needed. And also I'm a member of the Washington State Export Outreach Team. It's a collaboration of federal, state, and local level of export assistance agencies. And we work very closely so they can access other resources. And also, so export business development, it takes money. For example, if you ship your samples to Asia, the shipping cost can be high. For example, you may need to translate your marketing material to another language. And for example, you may need to register your IP in another country. So there is a program, it's called a STEP grant program. It can help offset some of the cost. It's a 75% reimbursement for qualified expenses. There are trade shows and events targeting small businesses, and oftentimes they are subsidized. So you pay minimum, a small small fee to attend those events. And a lot of times you get help to get ready and follow up. Export orders, once they come in, typically they are big orders. And a lot of exporters will need working capital financing. SBA has an export finance program so that the SBA provides up to 90% of guarantee to the banks. So the banks are more willing to finance export transactions. And it's important to get paid. There are tools out there like Exim Bank Export Credit Insurance and other tools by commercial banks to help ensure you get paid. So these are all available to help small businesses go through that chart I mentioned earlier to get ready. And so here is, I want to show you some of the export assistance agencies. So these agencies, they all have a dedicated team to help small businesses export. And so I work very closely with most of them, and I would be happy to direct small businesses to make sure they utilize their resources as well. Here's my contact information. So if you feel like small businesses may benefit from considering export, or if they are already exporting and want to expand to more markets and utilize our resources, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks, Ellie.
Yeah,
I just want to
sure.
share a little bit of a story. One of the clients that we collaborated on was a company that was trying to do their first export of an agricultural product. And I remember they assigned a couple of their junior staff members to the project, and it was quite a capacity building learning experience for them. And that was the funnest part for me, to see how vigorously they were following your advice and doing this research. So I'm just curious, what types of products do you commonly work with?
Yeah, so we find that small business manufacturers are typically good candidates for exporting. And also here in Washington State, agricultural products, value-added foods, they are good candidate for exporting as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Super. So you have to have a process that you can make a lot of something.
Yeah, one reminder we always have for small businesses is to, before you jump in, think about your production capability. So export sales, typically you need to sell a lot in one transaction to justify that cost of international transportation and that tariff, other cost. And so they typically come in big and less frequently comparing with the domestic orders. So how does that impact your production? We had small businesses that, never thought about these issues, just jumping, hey, I received an email of a trade show, looks good, only cost $100. So just attend it and send samples, and after meetings, all this energy, got a big order. Oh my God, it's too big. We can't fill the order.
Yeah. Comes in too big, too fast, and you can't keep up.
Yeah. And so I think Steve earlier mentioned about the financial discipline. And so one advice we have small businesses is also to know your numbers, run some numbers and know your cash flow and how the exporting may impact your cash flow.
Yeah, that's really good advice. We want to know what those costs are going to be before you get in too deep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anybody else have a question for Mia or Ellie? Oh, there's Brian's hand.
Thank you, Ellie. That was great. And I think there's a lot of fear and anxiety associated with export, and making that leap. And I was thinking about a former client of mine when I was a banker. Unfortunately, got stung by essentially it turned out to be a fake order from South Africa, and they were a value add food producer and took a significant financial hit. Are those some of the things that you help clients avoid? Because I think, if I recall correctly, I think it was one of those too good to be true, orders. And in hindsight, unfortunately, they were just, like I said, stung by the fraud.
Yeah. Brian, thank you for pointing that out. It's really common, especially like a lot of small businesses, they have never thought about exporting and they just suddenly get an inquiry from nowhere. And a lot of time, especially when you have this kind of inquiry, they are not necessarily legitimate. And so how we can help is having worked at a law firm and in international trade, so I can help take a look at the inquiry and see if there are some red flags. And also the Department of Commerce, US Department of Commerce, they have a service, they do charge a fee, they call International Company Profile. So I think it costs like $100 per company. So what they do is that they will do some due diligence about your buyer. And they have overseas representatives in pretty much every country, most countries, not North Korea, in most countries. And so they can access local database to do research about the country. And in some instance, they can travel on site to go to that business address to see if it's really there. And another great way is kind of a go around way. We don't publicly say it. We don't put it in paper or something like that. So Exim Bank has a great service. It's called export credit insurance. So it's just like you buy other insurance and it's a small fee. So your foreign buyer, to ensure that you receive payment from the foreign buyer. So if that buyer fails to pay you, then the Exim Bank will pay you. So, but Exim Bank is not silly, right? They're not they don't just blindly insure every transaction. So they actually do their due diligence on the buyer before they agree to give you that insurance. So if Exim Bank, after their due diligence, they say, we can't insure this transaction, then you got to be careful. Well, it's too risky.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a really thorough answer. I'm glad there's several solutions to that problem.
Yeah.
All right, well, I noticed we're a few minutes past time. I just want to thank you for showing up today and helping us understand what the organization can do for small businesses and how people in Jefferson County might tap in and get to meet you and work with you. And we'll also take Steve's challenge seriously that maybe we should be looking at sources of funding to get an advisor here that's allocated for us. So thank you for that invitation as well.
Thank you. This has been lovely.
Yep. Thanks for everybody that came. I hope you found something useful, and do reach out to the EDC if you want to follow up or need any more information.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.